Okay, and then we are live right now. So whoever's not speaking, we can try and get us put ourselves on mute.
So, Greg, how's the sound?
Should be fine.
How are we doing? So that's why I'm just going to also just use my phone to just also check the questions as they come in.
Do we have to be on mute when other people are speaking, Greg?
It's better to do that. Otherwise, you get echo. We're gonna get more echo.
I'll put myself on mute now.
Okay, so hello, property practitioners.
I just want to also just open my browser as well, Greg. Let's just have a look. So Greg, I can see that we're live.
Yeah, we're live. We can start, guys.
All right. So morning to everyone who's watching us, and morning again to Marina. Hey, Marina. And Louis, morning.
Morning, Graham.
Well, how are you, Louis?
Morning, Graham.
And then just to show everybody, I don't actually have the book with me. I know Marina's got the book, but I've just made a copy of. So this is Marina's best-selling book, Demystifying Sectional Title, that she wrote with Karen Blaze, also sectional title specialist. Marina, I think you've actually got your book there. Maybe you can do it a bit more justice than I am.
Thank you, Graham. Thanks for the opportunity. Yes, Karen and I co-authored this book, which is strictly speaking for anybody involved in the sectional title industry, but also aimed at estate agents.
Yeah. So, Marina, I mean, I've seen that book in many different places, in trustees' homes, on property practitioners' desks in their offices. So I think it's got very wide application, and also I think it's written in such a way that even a dummy like myself can understand how you've set out everything. So it's very nicely written. It really is.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
So, and I think, Marina, if I remember correctly, I think if people go to the BBM Law site, your law firm site, you can actually order it off your site.
Yes, there's actually a special site for it as well, which is www.demystifyingsectionaltitle.co.za.
Okay. So if anybody would like a copy, obviously they can go and they can get a copy. And you have the advantage now of seeing the author, one of the co-authors in the flesh. So what we're going, those of you that are watching, that watched us last week, will know that we started very interesting discussion around sectional title, and I really couldn't have asked sort of two more knowledgeable people in order to join me in this particular discussion. And Greg, maybe even today you're going to ask us some questions as well around sectional title. Just again, for those of you that don't know Greg, so Greg is the person that runs and controls the whole property practitioners group. And Greg, I see yesterday, I think the group hit 11,000 members.
Yeah, it's great. Thanks to the group. Big shout out to Marlon and the rest of the group for keeping the group going. There's lots of new projects in mind. Thanks to Grant Korea as well for pointing out we had a bubbling issue with some of the posts without a source reference. So although we've put some rules in place. We've just added some supplementary rules, so that can be found on the top right corner as a topic as well, as a rules companion.
So, Greg, I think that specifically as it relates to obviously the announcement by the president last night in terms of us moving from a level 5 to a level 4 lockdown, and where the whole real estate profession actually sits. Maybe, in fact, what I'll do is we'll end off today's session, and I'll just pose that question to both Marina and to Louis about what their thoughts are. And so I think to start off with, Marina, last week there were quite a few questions about trustees and the role and responsibility of trustees. So I'm going to ask you and Louis both the same question regarding trustees. You just maybe talk to us a little bit about what the role and responsibility of trustees are. So we know that also the name might actually be correct. Are they trustees? Aren't they now called scheme executives? And I think very often people sort of become a trustee because, well, there was no one else, and so they were asked to stand as a trustee, and okay, so they'll do it. Is it really as simple as all of that?
Mm. Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head, Graham, because at the end of the day, many people don't know what they're actually getting into when they become trustees. I've attended so many meetings where it comes up on the agenda, time to appoint the new trustees, and there's always this sort of shuffling of feet and, well, what does it really mean? I don't have time. Well, okay, there's nobody else, so yeah, I'll put up my hand and then we'll have a meeting afterwards to discuss what I have to do. And it really needs to go deeper than that, because the Community Scheme Ombud Service has concretized the view that scheme executives, that is, you're quite correct, that's what they are, they've been promoted to, but they're still known as trustees. Everybody still talks about trustees. They really need to educate themselves about what it means to be a trustee. They need to seek advice. That's specifically in Regulation 14 of the CSOS Act. So they've got to comply with their fiduciary duty. And when you say a trustee should be a trustee, there is a duty of trust and diligence and care that goes into being a trustee. And now, if you breach your fiduciary duty in terms of the Sectional Title Schemes Management Act, you can be held personally liable as a trustee. So a bit of a deep thought needs to go into whether or not you can be a trustee. At the end of the day, we don't want to discourage people, and a lot of people have said to me, geez, it's such a big thing to be a trustee. I mean, maybe I'd rather not do it. At the end of the day, it's admirable to be a trustee. It's actually quite noble, because you're really taking on that responsibility of protecting your asset.
Yeah, so look, I think, Marina, obviously all of the community schemes legislation has become quite complicated. Your starting point is of course the Sectional Titles Act, then you've got the Sectional Title Schemes Management Act, then you've got things like the CSOS Act, which deals with the whole Ombud service, which is a new feature of our law. It's only really in the last sort of 10 or 15 years that we've got to grips with the idea of having an ombud in certain industries that's able to resolve disputes that we can approach. And really, it's very difficult for somebody to be able to get to understanding all of the rules around sectional title and community schemes generally. And I think, as you correctly point out, it is a very noble thing to do, because at the end of the day, you are really looking after everybody's investment in your complex or your scheme. And so that's why I think that people need to also understand, if they're going to put their hand up to be a trustee, it's not just about going to a meeting once every second month. They really should be educating themselves on how community schemes work.
Correct, and I think this is where we should be. I think we've been behind for many, many years, and I think the regulation of managing agents, getting trustees up to date. I mean, in legislations like New South Wales, once you buy into a sectional title scheme, and if you become a trustee, within a certain amount of days, you have to complete a course trustees training course. Otherwise, you automatically lose that role. So they take it seriously, and that's where we need to be. We need to step up, and I'm grateful to the legislation that's allowing us to do that.
So, but Marina, I mean, I think that obviously, it is something that's important for people who are trustees to be aware of. And there are, of course, there are a number of sources of information that trustees can refer to. I mean, there are things like your book, as an example, and so at CPMD, there are also sectional title training courses that we run, and there are obviously other training programs available to people out there. But I think the point that we're making is that it's not something to be taken lightly. It is a responsibility that people need to take with some seriousness. Louis, so let me pose the same question to you. Just sort of briefly summarize for us the role and responsibility of trustees.
Yes, Graham. So long trustees are realizing we're not like directors in a company. In fact, the Companies Act is not applicable to sectional title.
Yes.
We're not as powerful. We're not running it as their business. They have that fiduciary duty to run the complex on behalf of all the owners.
Yes.
There's a huge duty on them. For instance, maintenance. They cannot say we do not have money for maintenance. There's a duty on trustees on behalf of the body corporate to maintain a premises. If there is not money available, they are in fact forced to find money by declaring special levies, but they can't refrain from maintenance. That's a huge duty on a trustee. Often, people will say, we're not ready or we don't have the knowledge to be trustees. For that reason, the new Act brought a relief on that point, that in the new Rule 28, you can even now appoint an executive managing agent. And then you don't need trustees for a complex. And then the new executive managing agent is taking over the role of the trustees, and they can run a complex without trustees until there are trustees ready and knowledgeable and trained to take over as trustees again. I think that's a very important new improvement in the legislation.
So, Marina, again, I'm going to ask you and Louis the same question. And Louis, so I'm going to give you a chance to think about it. You can't give us the same answers as Marina. So, Marina, give us the top 3 things that the trustees need to ensure happens. So, into your mind, what are the 3 most important things that trustees need to ensure that they do?
Well, I think the top one definitely is maintaining the complex. I mean, I think that's really, really important. Maintenance, you've got to have a written 10-year maintenance, repair and replacement plan, which the trustees have to have in place. And that's, for me, tops. I mean, if you don't have maintenance and your scheme's falling apart, that becomes a problem. I think secondly, rules. The rules are really important, to have proper rules and to be compliant with the community scheme ombud service, to have your complex registered and to make sure that you're paying the ombud levy every month and receiving it from owners. So rules need to be tailor-made. You know, I'm sitting with so many complexes where they've got these archaic rules dating back to 1971, some of them, which must be modernized and brought up to date. And you can do that and make sure you get a special resolution, update your rules, and then file them off at the Ombuds office. Thirdly, for me, trustees need to have a handle on arrear levies. Arrear levies, it's something which can make or break your scheme. If you're allowing people to get into debt, that's a big problem. And trustees now, if we're talking about hot off the press stuff now, we've had a directive from the community scheme ombud that trustees really need to focus their minds on the situation with the COVID-19 virus, because you're going to get a lot of people saying, look, I've been adversely affected, I can't pay, what do I do? How do they deal with levy holidays? How do they deal with that, taking into account that levies are the lifeblood of the scheme, and you still need to be paying salaries, you still need to be paying, different expenses and council for common property. So, yeah, get a handle on arrear levies. That's definitely on top 3 of my list.
So Marina, just to summarize that, we're saying maintenance, rules, and arrear levies.
Yeah.
Okay, so maintenance, making sure that you've got a 10-year maintenance plan in place. And for those of you that don't know, so one of the requirements for a community scheme is you need to have a 10-year maintenance plan in place. Second thing that Marina's saying is that you need to make sure that, number one, you have rules, and really, number two, that the rules are up to date. In other words, the rules are modernized. These are not rules that were made 30 years ago and haven't been updated. And then, of course, the third thing that we're saying is that you've got to keep a handle on arrear levies. So, Marina, just to digress, I mean, you talk about the latest directive from the Ombuds Service, and I see that on the 21st of April, that directive was in fact published, which now clarifies the situation about walking your dog or exercising in a community scheme, and it's now quite clear that in fact it's not allowed. But, given the President's announcement last night that exercise will be allowed under certain strict conditions, that might change in the next few days. So,
yes, I think, Rand, that relates to the lockdown until the 30th of April.
Yeah.
So I think that's where, you can, if the police come and arrest you for walking your dog in the scheme because somebody's reported you, you can still receive a fine of 1,500 Rand and have to pay an admission of guilt. So that is still, and the Ombuds Office has been quite busy with that. And another directive was released yesterday, just as a matter of interest for anybody, saying that you can't switch off electricity or reduce electricity or water, particularly at this time. It's always been that's the law, you can't do it, but there's a proper directive that came out yesterday where they say you can't do that either.
And I mean, look, Marini, you've mentioned the Ombud quite frequently. I think that our plan is that next week we're going to have a talk just dealing with the Ombud and the Ombud service and how it works. So, Louis, now you've had a chance to think about it. What are the top 3 things that the trustees need to really be aware of and put in place? Remember that you can't use the same as what Marina's mentioned. So Marina spoke about maintenance, making sure that you've got a 10-year maintenance plan in place. The second thing that she said is having rules that are up to date. And the third thing is making sure that you have a handle on arrear levies and that they don't get out of control.
Ryan, for me, the very first one is to look after the owner's investment. The resale price of the unit is of very high importance. Will banks grant bonds in future in this complex? Yes. Again, maintenance is very important, obviously.
Yes.
Looking after the finances of the complex, that it's run properly, that there's not a lot of money wasted or money paid out on things you could have saved. I think overseeing the budget.
Yeah.
Overseeing the budget is a part of the finances. And that's why the trustees must be very knowledgeable on finances. I always insist in body corporates when they choose new trustees for the year that at least one trustee must be an accountant or an auditor or someone with knowledge about finances. And another trustee must have a lot of knowledge about maintenance of complexes so that you can use the various skills of the various trustees during the year to keep the value of that property up, the resale value. Often investors will ask you, if I'm buying into the scheme, what is the growth rate of units in schemes like this? And then you can find that in one scheme there's no growth in value because there's no maintenance. But finances is a mess. Levies are outstanding. It's badly run with a managing agent with no knowledge, with trustees with no knowledge. The bank account is run down. There's no money in the bank because nowadays you must have 2 bank accounts. So you need that knowledge about the finance. The finance is for me number 1. Resale values also very important. And then maintenance in the third place.
All right, Lou, I'll give you a credit there. You obviously repeated what Marina mentioned. But I think the point is that really you're both saying similar things with regards to what's important and what we need to get a handle on. And of course the finances can get out of control very quickly. So I see Paul Davies has actually joined us this morning online. Marina, Paul says that there are over 780,000 sectional title townhouses registered at the deeds office, only 30,000 registered with CSOS. So I don't know if Paul's talking about, I think, individual units as opposed to actual number of schemes.
Yeah, there are about 56,000 schemes at the moment, with closer to 800,000 units in the country.
And how many of them are actually registered with CSOS?
Oh, I'd have to get the latest figures, but yeah, certainly not all of them. You know, CSOS have got approved performance plans every quarter. And I know that when I was on the board at CSOS, they were really aggressively starting to make sure that complexes were registered. They were even starting to speak to the banks about kind of linking in with the banks to say that if they're bondholders, then they need to check as well to see if their schemes are registered, and try to get that kind of pressure from the different role players. Yeah, but you know, they were sort of up to speed with their approved performance plans, but yeah, I think there's a bit of a spanner in the works at the moment, and hopefully once everything's back up and running, then they'll continue with an aggressive approach to register schemes.
So, Marina, obviously the approach you're talking about is a multi-pronged approach, because if you also ask the banks to ensure that those schemes are registered, then you're coming at it from all directions. So thanks, Paul. I think that's a very interesting comment that you made, and thanks for joining us this morning. I see Chris Phillips is also back with us. So hi, Chris. Chris followed us last week as well. And Chris asked some very interesting questions. Lou, I'm going to pose these questions to you. Don't you think that trustees should make more of an effort to explain the importance of the AGM to its members? Is this not their real chance to be heard and to make decisions for the upcoming year? So I think the point that Chris is making is that people really are very lax about attending the AGM, and they couldn't be bothered, and oh well, it's dinner time, and what difference does it make if I go anyway? So what would you say with regards to that question? So Chris is saying really the responsibility rests on the trustees to tell the members of the scheme, so that would be the members of the body corporate, why they actually need to attend the AGM.
Yes, Graham, I think that's very important. In fact, I believe there should be a duty on trustees to do some training of owners, or give feedback to owners during the year, even newsletters to owners, updating them and giving them more and more knowledge about what they should know about a body corporate. I mean, often people are complaining about the levies, and they go to an AGM and they say, we must now go and decide if we are putting up the levies by 10% for the next year. And that's completely wrong. You're not voting on levies at the AGM. You are discussing the budget, and then you're voting on the budget, not the levies. The levies are determined by the trustees at the first trustee meeting after the AGM. To work out what the levies will be according to PQs or nominated values, depending on what basis the scheme is running. But the budget is for me very important, and that people are taking part in discussing and monitoring all the expenses in the budget. So they're not after the AGM says, why is the levy high? Then it's only the owners to blame, and that's the message trustees should put to owners during the year. Become a part of the decision-making process. Attend AGMs. The quorums for AGMs are now higher than the old Act. It's now thirds for all complexes. When the past large complexes over 50 only could have a quorum of 20%. Now it's 33 and a third%. That means more people must now attend the AGM.
So Lee, also just looking at some of the other comments that have come in, and I think following on from the question that Chris has posed, so Susan as well, Susan, I think the surname is pronounced Magna, says that getting a quorum is often a nightmare. So I think that she's really following on from the question that Chris has posed, is that, perhaps the trustees need to do a little bit more to explain to owners why they need to come to the AGM. I think it's very common that people moan and complain, oh, the trustees have done this or the trustees decided on that. And then you ask a question, say, well, did you go to the AGM? And the person says, no. Okay, I couldn't have been bothered. I was watching TV and eating dinner. So I think that just obviously backing up the point that Chris is making with his question. So what I want to do is I want you to also then move on. Marina, you've got quite a nice thing in your book, which is a sectional title buyer's checklist, which I think is also very useful for property practitioners to ask these various questions. So if I can just go through, I mean, it's quite detailed. I just want to focus on a few of them. And the property practitioners out there, maybe, now's the time to get old style technology of a pen and a piece of paper and just really to make some notes. Of course, you can always go and watch this recording again, and you can play it back at your own time and in your own leisure. So, Marina, we first of all talk about this here is a checklist for property practitioners. So what do you need to know? What questions do you need to be asking? So firstly, let's just go over the idea of the participation quota. What is the participation quota in the scheme?
When we refer to a participation quota, it's the square meterage of a section, of your section, divided by the square meterage of all the other sections. So it tells you what kind of percentage you have in respect of voting and in respect of the levy that you're going to pay. So the larger your unit, the more you'll pay, and the higher your voting weight will be, the heavier your voting weight will be. So that's really the PQ, and you would find the PQ right at the back of your title deed, and you could also ask the managing agent. And PQ, the reason this participation quota thing has become really important is because in the new legislation, more and more relates to the PQ. So even the quorum now is based on value. And when you see the word value in the Sectional Title Schemes Management Act, that basically means PQ. So the quorum is calculated by value. Ordinary resolutions are no longer show of hands. That's a thing of the past. Ordinary resolutions are now based on value, based on PQ. So it's not a simple matter of one hand, one vote anymore. That's where it's important.
So, Marina, then if I understand that correctly, what we're saying is that if my floor area is bigger than, let's say, my neighbour's floor area, I'm going to have a bigger participation quota, because my floor area as a percentage of the total scheme is going to be bigger than my neighbour next door.
Yeah, so Graham, in sectional title, size does count.
Okay, right, Marina, we'll just leave it there. Let me move over to Louis. So, Louis, just go over for us, why is the participation quota important? Let's just talk about 2 or 3 things as to why we need to know what the participation quota is.
The participation quota obviously are meaning 3 things in sectional title. One is your size, the amount of levies you're paying.
Yeah.
Secondly, your voting rights is based on PQ. And thirdly, what you own as an undivided share in the common property is based on your PQ. It's like the swimming pool. If I've got a PQ of 5%, it's meaning that I own 5% of that swimming pool on the common area. It's not to say that I must now only swim in 5% of the pool. That will cramp my style. I can swim in the entire pool so long I do it reasonably, together with 20 other people who may all have similar PQs.
Yes.
It's determining your part of the common property. So when you are reselling a property, people must not only look at your unit in fact, your section you're buying, let's look at the section plus the undivided share in the common property.
Yes.
So a complex with more sporting facilities, a complex with larger garden areas could be much more valuable than one with lesser garden areas. Because your PQ is determining your share in your common property. And that could push up the value of your unit tremendously.
Okay. So then what we're saying is that the size of your PQ means that you're going to pay either a lower or a higher amount of levy. So if there's a smaller PQ, you'll pay a smaller levy. If there's a bigger PQ, you'll pay a bigger levy. And then also what's going to happen is that it's going to give you an indication as to what the size of your undivided share in the common property is. Marina, so just going back to you, where will we find the PQ?
Well, the PQ would be, it's a schedule. So it's a schedule and it's set out at the back of your documents, your title deed. And you can also find a copy of the schedule online. And I think generally managing agents have copies of schedules as well, because their job is really based on calculating PQs at meetings. And I know that a lot of managing agents have worked on apps. So when people come into meetings, then they automatically calculate things like quorums and voting, etc. In fact, the managing agent that I spoke to yesterday, they've got a portal, a platform, where it becomes easier for people to go in and vote online before the AGM actually starts. That automatically calculates the PQ of every person coming in and voting.
I've seen with certain managing agents, I've seen that system as well. So then, Marina, if an agent or property practitioner is listing a sectional title property for sale, so what documents should they have in their possession?
Well, I've always said from the word go, when I started training estate agents a long time ago, is to keep a file, that you have everything available in your file. You've got a copy of your sectional plan. You've got a copy of a deed search setting out what's in the owners in the scheme. You've got a copy of the rules. All those things are really, really incredibly important to go forward. And also, one of the other things on the checklist is, of course, what you're selling. You know, in any field in life, if you're a salesperson, you need to understand your product. And there I found in the past, many estate agents fell short of that, in my view. I think people are becoming more sophisticated, as you said, their courses online, their books. Owners understand, and prospective purchasers understand what they're wanting to look at buying. And if the estate agent, is not understanding that, look at your offer to purchase. Is your offer to purchase reflective of what you're selling? So many offers to purchase don't mention things like exclusive use areas properly. They don't say, is it exclusive use through the rules? Is it exclusive use areas? Are they registered exclusive use areas? Or is it simply common property that you're buying? So those are the type of things that you need to be understanding, and your sectional plans will really set that out quite clearly for you.
All right, but Marina, as I understand you, I think that there's two sets of documentation you would require here. So one would be documentation that you would keep that deals or revolves around the scheme generally. So what we should have as a property practitioner, if we're operating in a particular scheme, and I think this is regardless as to whether or not you're selling or letting. So you should have a copy of the sectional plan. That would be number one. You should have a copy of the rules of the scheme, number two, and you should have done a deed search. The deed search will give you an indication as to who all of the various owners are. That obviously will change over time because, of course, the ownership of units will change over time. And then from the individual owner, one would then get the title deed. Okay, not so?
Yes,
so
correct.
You need to get a copy of the title deed from the owner. And obviously, because things like rules and so on do change, I think we would also recommend for property practitioners to build good relationships with the managing agents.
Exactly. That's what I was just about to say.
And the portfolio manager that deals with that particular scheme, because a simple phone call to that portfolio manager will give you a lot of information, especially with regards to anything that may have changed of late.
Definitely. And I would go further. And I mean, from a marketing perspective as well as an estate agent, I wouldn't sell in a scheme if I didn't actually know who the trustees were in that scheme. I would engage with trustees. I think many estate agents are a little bit scared of the trustees.
Yeah.
And, just to distinguish yourself from other estate agents, I would definitely approach trustees, even introduce myself at a trustees meeting, just so that they can see that I'm on top of my game.
So I think there's a few questions that have come in which we'll take shortly. Louise, I wanted to ask you this question for the property practitioners out there that are watching us. So when you're buying into sectional title, so what are you getting? What is it that you're actually buying?
Well, Graham, you buy the unit, and the unit is again consisting of a section measured and given to you as a certain square meters on the sectional title plan, plus the undivided share of a common property. And you buy the two, so the section plus the undivided share of a common property gives you the unit. So you must look at both, as I said earlier. You must look at the gardens, you must look at the improvements on the property, you must look at the condition of the property. You must also look at the financials, because if the body corporate sit with 2 million rand in their two bank accounts, that will make your unit much more valuable to purchase, because if you've got a 5% PQ, you in reality owns 5% of the money in the bank. And you see how important it is to look at the money in the bank, and you must look at the admin fund and the reserve fund. There are obviously certain percentages given in the Act what the reserve fund must be at. It must be at least 25% of your annual turnover, otherwise you must up your budget by 15%. I often deal with schemes, and then the two funds are run down, but there's no money in the bank. That could have a negative effect on the value of that unit for a buyer.
So, but Lee, just getting back to what it is that you actually own. So the section would generally be the living part, if we're talking about residential. But I could actually have two sections. So a garage, for example, could also be a separate section. So the living part could be section 1 and the garage part could be section 2. What happens with, and I know we did touch on this last week, so we just summarize it very quickly. What about a carport? Do I own my carport?
Then your carport will normally only be the exclusive use area, or it could just be common area if there's no exclusive use in place. A carport will never be a part of your section because there's no wall to measure. Because the land surveyor must measure from the middle of the wall to draw up the sectional title plan. I've never seen a carport yet as a part of a section. Sometimes patios are forming part of a section,
yes,
but not carports.
All right, so just to look at some of the comments and the questions that that the viewers are making. Again, and I think we've covered most of these things. So Paul Davies has mentioned the 6 Ps of sectional title. The one we haven't spoken about is pets. But I'm sure it's Marina and Lou, you'll obviously agree with these 6 Ps. So pets can often be a major problem. And Marina, pets would then also be covered in the rules, wouldn't they?
Yeah, pets are the most emotive issue in sectional title, and people have spent thousands getting advocates involved in arbitrations. I remember when I was doing arbitrations, people take their pets really seriously. And as an estate agent, that's really where you can get into the most trouble. You see 1 or 2 cats wandering around, a little dog in unit number 5, and you ask your seller, are pets allowed in this complex? And they say, yeah, I think so, because that guy's got a pet, or that guy's got a snake, or that guy's got a budgie. So yeah, I think they're allowed, and that's your biggest mistake. For pets, pets will fall squarely in your rules. And you need to look at the rules which have got a compliance certificate from CSOS or whatever rules are registered and now at CSOS, no longer in the deeds office, to see. I mean, you've got your standard rules, your default rules really, which say you're allowed pets, and it goes through the different kinds of pets, dogs, cats, reptiles and birds. Should you receive, but you have to have consent from the trustees based on certain conditions that the trustees lay out, and that's your general standard kind of vanilla rule about pets. Also, we've got a new rule that came out with the legislation which says that people who want to keep guard dogs don't really have to ask the trustees for permission because it's deemed that the trustees have given their permission for guard dogs, which I think is fantastic. I mean, that should have been the case all along. There can be rules, though, in the complex which say no pets allowed, full stop. And that means no pets allowed. If 75% of a special resolution is taken where owners are of the view and of the mindset that there are no pets allowed, that means no pets allowed. And, you know, a guy who moves into the scheme that maybe the estate agent has said, oh, yeah, there are pets allowed and there aren't, will really be annoyed, and the backlash will come at the estate agent if you're not up to date with the rules.
Yeah. So just following on from Paul's comments, so, you know, he talks about the 6 P's of sectional title. So pets, parking, which we've spoken about, the people, obviously the people in the scheme, your prescribed management rules, and we've spoken about rules, PQs, so the participation quotas, and then also plans, which we've spoken about. So I think, so just to summarize for the property practitioners out there, that what we're saying is that you need to make sure that you've got all the documents relating to the scheme. So if you're going to be working in a scheme, either selling or letting, so you need to have a copy of the plans, you need to have a copy of the rules, you need to have, over time, obviously this will change, you need to have a copy of the deeds officer to know who all the various owners are, and you need to have a good relationship with the managing agent, as well as know who the trustees are, so that you can really just make a phone call, send a message to ask certain questions. Also, by having a copy of the rules, you know what's allowed and what's not allowed in the scheme. And if somebody says, well, if I move, Snowy the dog is coming with me, can Snowy live with me? Then you need to know that if you're saying yes, that in fact the answer is yes, not just that you have seen the dog in somebody else's unit. And in fact, Marina, I mean, I know of a particular scheme where pets caused major problems. There was a particular chairperson in the scheme who decided for themselves that they're going to keep a couple of pets, and other people wanted to have pets, and they were told no, you can't. So it obviously can cause a huge amount of problems. Louis Taisnell asks a question. He says, during the lockdown, how do you organize an AGM?
The new Sectional Title Schemes Management Act is making provision for AGMs not to be held in person only, but you can also have people joining the AGM in other means. That means it could even be a Zoom or Skype meeting, and people can join an AGM through Skype or Zoom. In fact, the entire meeting could be a Zoom meeting, and it's quite allowed in terms of the new act, because they are allowing other means of having meetings.
So, Louis, there actually would be no need to postpone an AGM until everybody can get together. You could actually do it electronically.
Yes, you can. And
would you have to give the same amount of notice? All the rules would apply?
The same amount of notice, and your voting cards could be sent by email to the people, and the people can return it by email and just say they're voting yes or no on every motion. That could even allow a meeting to be over an extended period. You can have a meeting over an entire day if it's a big complex, and give everyone a chance to vote.
Louis, how many days notice do you need to give for the AGM?
14 days for a normal AGM. Unless there are special or unanimous resolutions to be taken, then you must give 30 days notice.
In other words, as long as the trustees sent out the notification by email and they give 14 days notice, so that AGM could actually be held electronically, there would be no problem with it.
No problem with that. I don't think body corporates must hold back on holding their AGMs because that could cause a lot of problems, like then you could run short of finances. Then you apply that section of Management Rule 21, and you must have special resolutions passed by the trustees to increase levies by 10% until the next AGM. The better is to rather have your AGM in place within the 4 months after the end of your financial year.
Yeah. Marina, you mentioned right at the beginning of our presentation, one of the important things is arrear levies. But if we just talk about levies, and obviously this is something that property practitioners really need to get to grips with in their scheme, because any potential buyer would obviously want to know, so what am I in for on a monthly basis? How much is it going to cost me to live here? And of course, we're talking about residential schemes, but there are many non-residential sectional title schemes as well. So firstly, how are levies determined? How do we actually calculate the levies? Do I have to pay a levy? So if I decide that, well, actually I don't like the chairman, so I'm not going to pay the levy in protest because I'm absolutely disgusted that maybe the chairman said something to me at some point in time that I didn't like. And what about special levies? So can special levies be raised? So how does it all work with the levies?
Well, the Sectional Title Schemes Management Act is really specific about the functions and powers of the body corporate. And one of the functions of the body corporate set out in the Act is that the body corporate needs to establish an administrative fund, which is your levy fund. And that power or the function is then delegated in terms of Section 7 of the Sectional Titles Act to the trustees. So the trustees need to set up an administrative levy fund. And for every year, as Louis mentioned earlier, there needs to be a budget that is set. And usually the managing agent together with the trustees work on the budget to see what the expenses of the common property areas are, the maintenance and repair, because that's what levies are for. They need to also in the budget, they need to add things like salaries, auditors' fees, managing agents' fees, insurance for common property areas. So there are a lot of things that go into the levy calculation. And once you've got that levy calculation and you're going to an annual general meeting, the trustees will raise the levy at the annual general meeting. It's one of the discussion points. And then the meeting will have to approve those levies. And directly afterwards, Louis also mentioned the trustees need to meet to take a resolution to confirm what that levy is from the annual general meeting outcome. And if the trustees don't do that, there's been case law, the body corporates of the peaks, where in fact somebody got out of paying levies because they raised the fact that the trustees didn't take that resolution after the annual general meeting. So that's an important thing for bodies corporate to look at. But levies are everything in a scheme, and special levies can be raised. Before the new legislation, special levies were raised for everything and anything. And the whole rationale behind the new Sectional Title Schemes Management Act was to say, look, we need to provide for a separate reserve fund, a separate fund where you're putting your money in to fund the maintenance, repair and replacement plan. So we're going to see fewer levies, special levies being raised. And that was the whole point of that reserve fund. But of course, the trustees can still raise special levies for things like maintenance on urgent things that have popped up or cropped up. But as I say, the need for that should be really wholly whittled down by now because of the separate fund.
So then it's obviously very important for the property practitioner to be aware of the financial health of the scheme. I know Louis mentioned this on a couple of occasions already about the property practitioner actually having a handle on the financials and knowing what the financial health of the scheme is. So I think that would be one of the important things for property practitioner to be aware of, is in fact whether the scheme is in financial difficulty, and if it's got money in the bank and if it's cash flush.
Also, Grant, so if I can just interject, it's not only perhaps the levy, the property practitioner needs to triple check whether or not there's also a contribution that's being paid for exclusive use areas. That's something in addition to the levy. So if you've got a registered or rule-created exclusive use area, the body corporate, by all accounts, is actually under a duty. The act is peremptory. The management rules say that you shall, the body corporate shall raise an additional contribution on that exclusive use area in order to defray the cost of maintenance, water, electricity, and they also mention rates and taxes on that area. So that is something that people will get cross, you know, if they buy a property and somebody forgot to tell them, oh, by the way, there's another 800 Rand additional contribution for exclusive use areas.
So, Marina, does that mean if my garden is an exclusive use area, does that mean that I need to be paying an additional levy?
Definitely. Contribution. Yeah. It's something that a lot of body corporates just miss, or managing agents miss, or either they don't want to rock the boat and, you know, just leave it for the moment. But actually, I mean, we've had cases where we've had adjudicators hold it. Actually, it's not whether you feel like it or not, it should be raised.
All right, so just a few of the questions, Lev, I'll come back to you. You know, we spoke about, I don't know, Greg, is Louis still with us? I see his picture seems to have frozen.
Louis, are you there?
Louis, are you there?
I'm still here, yeah.
Okay, your bandwidth seems to be fading a bit.
Yeah, I think maybe you're just
I'm
having
still here.
Okay, good. Marina, I've just got a quick question on what you've commented on. Is it okay for the body corporate to distribute the portion of a specific units or sections garden to the entire complex, irrespective of whether the other units have gardens or not? Because that's what they're doing right now. A lot of them are doing that. You say they're missing it, but they're absorbing the cost of a specific garden unit, for example, into the entire scheme. So they are taking the cost. The cost is going somewhere. It's being absorbed into the entire scheme.
Yeah, Greg, it depends on whether or not it's reflected on the plans as CP. If gardens are common property, yes, then they will be dropped into the scheme. But if they're registered in the deeds office, by way of also notarial deed of cession, which is a real right that somebody has on an exclusive use area, that cost is for the owner of that exclusive use area. Even if it's in the rules, if it's created through the conduct rules, we discussed it the last time we were together. If your exclusive use areas are through the conduct rules, those will also be additional charges for the owner of that exclusive use area.
Okay, I understand.
Greg, so make a list of your questions that you might have. I'm going to go back to Louis. Are you with us? You seem to be freezing up there. Marina, I hope that Louis is going to be able to join us. I think he's having a bit of a bandwidth issue. Can you hear us, Louis? Louis, what you might want to do is just turn your video off, and we can just carry the voice. So, Marina, just while we're waiting for Louis there, let me just pose the question that I was going to ask Louis. You know, I spoke to Louis a little bit earlier about having an AGM via some kind of a technology platform. And so Mark Rickles has asked a question. He says, doesn't your constitution have to allow for that? Can you just go ahead and have your AGM by means of an electronic platform, or would your I think what Mark's referring to would be the rules. So wouldn't the rules have to then allow for meeting by means of an electronic platform?
Yes, well, they do. They do allow for that. So your management rules do. In fact, it's Management Rule 17, which allows for that kind of thing, as long as people can be identifiable over that medium, and that everybody has access to the meeting. You definitely can. Yeah, we've caught up from a technological point of view. What I also wanted to add, when we were talking about AGMs, is that there's an interesting management rule which also refers to the fact that you can waive the right to have an AGM and a special general meeting. If everybody agrees on the points or the resolutions that you need to take, there is also that option, which might just be a little bit easier during these difficult times.
So that would be almost like by round robin, where you'd be communicating with everybody. Everybody would then say, fine, we agree, no need to have a meeting. I think, look, we seem to have lost Louis there with his connection. So, Marina, I'm just going to talk to you about the other questions that we've received. I want to just clarify something here for all the property practitioners. We're talking about rules and we're talking about management rules, but then we also talk about something called house rules. Is there a difference between the two? So do you get management rules and house rules, or is it something different?
Well, we get house rules were sort of the old rules under the 1971 Act. They used to call them house rules. So as the position currently reflects now, you've got management rules and conduct rules. That's for the purposes of property practitioners. That's important to note. So management rules in our book, we call them the Big Brother rules. The Big Brother rules are the rules that are set out, the really kind of more serious issues with more gravitas, trustees and how you budgets and meetings and administrative fund and all of that. Then you've got the conduct rules, which are the little sort of pesky little brother rules, which talk to things that cause the most problems in sectional title, like pets and parking and advertisements all over sectional title schemes and the behavior and conduct of owners and that type of thing. So those are the two sets of rules that you should have. And often in the bigger schemes, the management rules might contain a few different little things that the default rules don't necessarily contain. So it would be nice to just go through them. We're not saying, make it your life's mission to go through a thesis of management rules, but going through them will just sort of equip you a little bit more for any questions that come around.
So then the point that we're making here is that the management rules and the conduct rules, you can actually use those ones that have been created in terms of legislation if you want to use that as your default position. But it is possible that certain of those rules you can change in order to suit the specific needs of the scheme.
Yes.
Okay, so property practitioners out there need to be aware that you do get rules that have been created in terms of legislation, as Marina and I are talking about management and conduct rules, but it's also possible that certain of those rules may have been amended over time. And we'd also need to know if they've been amended properly insofar as decisions taken at general meetings and if they've actually been registered. Because I know that there are some schemes where rules have been changed, but they've never actually been registered. So people just use the new rules, but in actual fact, legally they don't need to because they haven't been registered. Leo, are you back with us?
I am back. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. So Wendy Darris has asked us an interesting question. The file that Marina was talking about, putting all these documents together, and we spoke about getting some information from the managing agents. And I suspect Wendy might have had some difficulty with some of these managing agents. So the question she poses, are managing agents obliged to give property practitioners a copy of the sectional plan, a copy of the rules? So is that an obligation on the managing agent?
Absolutely. The managing agent, in terms of the rules, must make copies available of things like financial statements and rules, etc. And the owner of a sectional title scheme can in fact have access to all the books of account of that managing agent, to look at the documents of that scheme and even require copies, and he can only be charged a reasonable fee for the copy.
So, Lou, I think the point that we're making is that any owner is entitled to have access to those documents. So if a property practitioner is not able to get those documents from the managing agent, then the request would come through the owner, and the managing agent has to then comply with that request.
Any estate agent, in fact, has got the right to demand copies of things like financial statements and rules to assist him to market the property.
And Marina, so Anna Furry asks, and this is obviously a very topical question at the moment, and I've seen this on lots of different fora and lots of different news articles that have been written. So she says, due to lockdown and people not earning any money, what happens if they're not able to pay their levies and all their rent? So this is also slightly a rental question, it's not just a pure sectional title question. So the question is, can the landlord put the lights off? So
right, so that is a hot topic at the moment, and again, the community scheme ombuds saw this coming, so they issued a directive on the 23rd of April. If you go onto their website, you'll see that it says under no circumstances can the lights be switched off by the body corporate. That was the case before this, but now it's just become a little bit more sort of prevalent, and you're not allowed to switch off or reduce the lights at all under any circumstances. And I must say, I really enjoyed the approach of one of the large managing agents who's a client of mine. What they're doing is they're sending a letter out to everybody to say, look, we understand the position at the moment. We know that some people have been affected. So we are prepared to give a levy holiday. The trustees will look on an ad hoc basis, so they're not going to reduce levies across the board for everybody. But if you can prove by way of a letter, in any other way that you've been retrenched or that you've lost your job or that you've applied for temporary relief or whatever it is, we are prepared to look at assisting with levies. But then we're going to enter into a settlement arrangement with you, and we want an acknowledgement of debt signed for that period of time. And I think that's only fair under the circumstances.
But Marina, I have seen what some of the managing agents have done is they've communicated with the members of the body corporate to say, well, we've had a trustees meeting and we've decided that for, let's say, May, June and July, that we're reducing the levies by 10%. Are they able to do that?
No, definitely not. They're not. They need an ordinary resolution from the body corporate to reduce levies across the board.
Yeah. So I think that those schemes where the trustees have made those decisions, obviously because of the emergency situation that we find ourselves in, is that where trustees have made that decision, even just with a trustees meeting, if let's say the trustees have got onto their own Zoom meeting and they've decided we're reducing levies by 10% for the next 3 months, actually there should have been a properly constituted meeting of the body corporate in order to authorize that. So somebody could take issue with that and say, no, in fact, actually everybody must pay the full levy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the thing is, we've got a situation now where also, unfortunately, every Tom, Dick and Harry might want to join jump onto the bandwagon.
Yes.
People who've been in arrears before with their levies now all of a sudden saying, oh, well, now, I really can't pay.
Yeah, well, of course, it opens the floodgates, doesn't it? And then it's 2-3 months and the body corporate's in financial trouble. Louise, I must tell you, so you know David Enslin. David Enslin just put a comment on regarding our discussion. He said, Louise having a popcorn moment, popping up and turning white because your screen was flashing on and off. So apparently you look like a piece of popcorn, Louis. Marina and Louis, our hours come to an end, but there's just one last thing that I want to ask you, insofar as what needs to be asked by the property practitioner. This checklist that we're talking about for a property practitioner to go through and make sure that they are properly educated about the scheme that they're either selling or letting in. I think something that's often ignored because it's not really all that interesting, but it's something that's absolutely vital insofar as the responsibilities of the trustees are concerned, is insurance. So what's the situation insofar as insurance is concerned? What do the trustees need to ensure happens with insurance?
Ryan, the trustees, in terms of the Act, must in fact take out 3 different type of insurances. One is the insurance on the building, and that must be done annually after the AGM when the new insurance schedule is voted in by the owners. They must in fact have a valuation put in place every 3 years in terms of the new Act. They can't just work on their own figures. And then a second insurance must be in place for public liability, for anyone getting injured or any claim coming against a body corporate for public liability. There is a formula how much they must take out. There's a minimum you must take out in terms of that insurance. And then there's a new insurance which is also now appearing in the CSOS Act, not only for sectional title but for all community schemes. And that's insurance for fidelity. We call it the fidelity insurance, protecting the body corporate against theft or fraud by trustees or managing agents or employees of a body corporate. That's a new insurance they brought in 2016. And as I said, not only for sectional title, but for all community schemes. Again, there's a formula of for that insurance, and that's in addition to the insurance offered by the Fidelity Fund of the Estate Agents Board, which means you could sit with double insurance on that point.
Yes.
The Estate Agents Affairs Board will only pay out if the fidelity insurance taken out by the body corporate is not fully covering the claim. So, but you have now insurance from both sides.
All right. So, Marina and Louis, we have run slightly over an hour. That I know that people are probably getting a little bit itchy and want to move on with their day. So, I want to just end off with a question that I'm going to pose to you, which will obviously be your opinion, as opposed to having any legal weight, and we'll obviously have to wait and see what the relevant government ministers actually announce. But just off the topic of sectional title, last night the President, of course, announced a downgrade from the end of next week from level 5 to level 4 in terms of where we are in lockdown. Obviously, the multi-billion rand question right throughout the real estate industry is whether or not property practitioners can get back to work. What does this mean insofar as the deeds office is concerned? And also, what does this mean for rental agents? People might have, let's say, had to move already at the end of March. They've stayed on an extra month. You might have people that are relocating across provinces. They need to move from Gauteng down to the Free State or down to the Western Cape, whatever it may be. So where does this leave us in the real estate industry? Are we able to carry on working from the end of next week? As I say again, it's just your opinion, and I know it doesn't have any legal weight, and we certainly don't want people posting on the various different fora and websites that this is what Marina or Louis said or Graham. So this is just really our opinion that we're finishing off our discussion with. Marina, over to you.
Graham, I think that, level 4 sets out the fact that professional services will be permitted to continue on the 4th of May. And my feeling is that that's not a really narrow view. It's not just lawyers and doctors and that kind of professional services. I do think that property practitioners would probably fall under that, but subject to really strict conditions surrounding how things are done, how, show houses and that kind of thing. And of course, I mean, the deeds office is closed. They'll only open once we hit a level 3. So yeah, let's see going forward. Not sure. We'll see early next week.
Yes, of course. I mean, we'll have to wait and see. Louis, what do you think?
I agree with Marina. I believe estate agents can be seen as a professional service. Nowadays, they must have qualifications in place. So they're not just people working as salespeople from the street. They've got a certain status. In fact, the new Property Practitioners Act are changing the name estate agent now to property practitioners. It's an indication of their status with the new qualifications. So I believe they are falling under that section of professionals, and they should be able to start practicing, although there will now be no transactions going through the deeds office, because the deeds office will fall under the next level, where they talk about the opening of state apartments.
So look, obviously we'll have to wait and see over the next few days the pronouncements made by government. But I think that there has been quite a lot of misinformation that's obviously appearing on lots of different websites and forums and so on. So I think the point is that before anybody makes any definitive decision, we're going to have to wait and see from the authorities as to what's actually allowed and what's not allowed. So I think that's really the issue, is that we will have to just bide our time and wait and see what the authorities do actually prescribe. So I want to thank both of you again. Thanks, Marina, for your time this morning.
Thank you. An absolute pleasure. Thank you.
For your time. It's lovely to talk to both of you. I look forward to when we're able to actually get together in person again. Greg, of course, thank you once again for managing the control room for us there and making sure that all the technology is operating. And as I indicated at the beginning of our talk, what we're going to be doing next week is we're going to be having a look at CSOS. We're going to be looking at certain of the provisions of the CSOS Act, which is the Ombuds Service. And we're going to be talking, I think, Marina, we must maybe also just touch a little bit on some of the draft regulations and have a bit of a discussion around the draft regulations. Even although they are in draft form, I think there's some things that are quite important that we must maybe just have a bit of a discussion around. So thanks very much to all of you. I just want to see if there are any further questions that people have posed. We'll have a look.
Marina, there's one. Where do you get your book? I think there's a question earlier.
There are two ways to get the book at the moment. The one is through the website, which is www.demystifyingsectionaltitle.co.za. And the other is through my office or through our website. And our office, you can email Lola, Lola, DaCosta, at bbmlaw.co.za.
Marina, I think just to make it easy, if they just go to the website bbmlaw.co.za, they can search for you and it's under your profile.
Yeah.
As opposed to trying to remember Lola's email address.
That's fine.
So if you just go onto the bbmlaw.co.za and you'll find the information there. And if anyone would like to email me, my email address is Graham, it's spelled Graeme, at cpmd.co.za. Any queries or questions, or if you've got any queries or questions for Marina and Louis, and I'll be only too happy to pass it on to them. So, guys, wish you all a good week ahead. I know we're starting from the weekend, but as I think I've said to both of you, I think this is what a month of Sundays must feel like. And I think it's going to be a big shock for us to get back to a normal routine and traffic and school and so on and so on. But we obviously wish everybody out there a happy and healthy weekend. And I think just some blessings for our whole country that we're able to see through to the end of this absolute state of disaster that we're currently in. And by supporting one another, and that's obviously the purpose of doing these type of talks, is to support one another and to be able to share information and that you know that you're not on your own and that there are people out there that you can talk to. So thanks very much. Wishing everybody a good weekend. Thanks, Greg.
Thanks, guys.
And
enjoy the day.
cheers.
Cheers. Bye.